There are battles in life that no one else can see. No applause, no witnesses, just you and the voice inside your mind. It's the voice that questions your worth, magnifies your fears, and quietly holds you back from becoming who you're capable of being. Most people try to silence this voice. Some try to ignore it. Others don't even realize it's there. They simply accept it as truth. But what if your thoughts are not facts? What if the way you think can be trained, shaped, and strengthened, just like a muscle? This story is not about eliminating negative thoughts. That's not how the mind works. Instead, it's about understanding them, challenging them, and choosing what you allow to grow within you. As you read, you may see parts of yourself in Ethan, his doubts, his struggles, his quiet moments of realization. And maybe, just maybe, you'll begin to notice your own thoughts a little differently. Because the moment you become aware of your mind is the moment you begin to take control of it. Welcome to the journey of transforming your inner world. Chapter 1. The noise inside Ethan's mornings didn't begin with energy or excitement. They began with hesitation. The alarm would ring, and before his feet even touched the ground, his mind would already be awake, flooded with thoughts he never invited. You didn't do enough yesterday. Today will be the same. You're falling behind. He would lie there for a few extra minutes, staring at the ceiling, feeling an invisible weight pressing down on him. Nothing around him looked wrong. His room was neat, his life was stable. But inside, it felt like a storm that never passed. As he got ready for the day, the noise followed him. While brushing his teeth, a thought would whisper, "Look at you, pretending to have it together." While checking his phone, everyone else is doing better than you. While getting dressed, what's the point? Nothing will change. These weren't loud thoughts. They didn't demand attention. That was their power. They blended in so naturally that Ethan never questioned them. At work, things weren't much different. During meetings, even when he had ideas, he stayed silent. A voice inside would quickly shut him down. Don't say it. It's probably stupid. When someone else spoke, his mind compared. See? They're smarter, more confident. You'll never be like that. Every small mistake felt huge. Every success felt like luck. By lunchtime, Ethan was already exhausted, not from work, but from the constant battle inside his own head. He started avoiding things, avoiding challenges, because they might prove the negative thoughts right. Avoiding conversations, because he feared judgment. Avoiding risks, because failure felt unbearable. Without realizing it, his world began to shrink. That evening, as he walked home, he noticed how different everything looked through the lens of his thoughts. The sky wasn't beautiful, it was dull. The laughter around him felt distant, almost like it belonged to another world he wasn't part of. He reached a small park and sat down on an empty bench. For a moment, he just watched. A child was trying to fly a kite, failing again and again, but laughing every time it fell. An elderly couple walked slowly, smiling, saying nothing, but somehow saying everything. A group of friends joked loudly, completely carefree. Ethan wondered, how are they so light? He looked down at his hands and then closed his eyes. Inside, the noise was still there. You don't belong here. You'll never feel like them. This is just who you are. For the first time, instead of accepting those thoughts, he felt tired of them. Not defeated, just tired. And in that quiet moment, something unfamiliar appeared. Not a solution, not clarity, but a question. What if these thoughts aren't facts? The question didn't silence the noise, but it created a small gap, a tiny space between Ethan and his thoughts. And in that space, for the first time in a long time, there was a hint of peace. It wasn't a breakthrough, but it was a beginning. Chapter 2. The Old Gardener. The next morning, Ethan woke up with the same familiar heaviness, but something was different. That one question from the night before lingered in his mind. Asterisk, what if these thoughts aren't facts? Asterisk, it didn't silence the negativity, but it made him curious. Instead of rushing through his day, he found himself thinking about it, returning to it, almost like a small crack of light in a dark room. That evening, without planning to, his feet led him back to the park. It felt strange, like he was being pulled there by something he didn't fully understand. The park looked the same, yet Ethan noticed more this time: the rustling leaves, the soft glow of the setting sun, the quiet rhythm of life moving without resistance. And then he saw him, an old man, bent slightly with age, carefully tending to a small patch of garden near the corner of the park. His movements were slow but deliberate, as if every action had meaning. He knelt in the soil, gently pulling out weeds, one by one, without frustration. There was patience in his hands, peace in his presence. Ethan watched for a few minutes before walking closer. "You've been doing that for a while," Ethan said, half curious, half amused. The old man looked up, a soft smile forming on his face. "And I'll be doing it tomorrow too." Ethan let out a small breath. "But why? The weeds will just grow back again." The old man chuckled quietly, brushing the dirt off his hands. "Of course they will. That's their nature." Ethan frowned slightly. "Then what's the point of removing them?" The old man stood up slowly and looked at the garden around him. Small flowers bloomed between patches of green, vibrant and alive. "The point," he said, "is not to stop weeds from existing. It's to stop them from taking over." Ethan didn't respond immediately. Something about those words felt personal. The old man continued, "If I leave this garden alone, the weeds will grow faster than the flowers. They'll choke the life out of everything else. And eventually, all you'll see is a field of weeds." Ethan crossed his arms, thinking. "So you're saying it's about control?" The old man shook his head gently. "Not control. Care." He pointed to a small flower near Ethan's feet. "You don't fight weeds with anger. You replace them with attention to what you want to grow." Ethan looked down at the flower. It was small, almost unnoticeable, yet somehow it stood out against the soil. "But isn't it exhausting?" Ethan asked. "Doing this every day?" The old man smiled again, this time with a hint of understanding. "Only if you see it as a burden. I see it as a choice." There was a pause. The wind moved softly through the trees, carrying a quiet stillness between them. Then the old man looked directly at Ethan and said, "Tell me something. How does your mind feel these days?" The question caught Ethan off guard. He hesitated. "Loud," he admitted. "Negative. Like it never stops." The old man nodded, as if he had heard this many times before. "Then your garden needs tending." Ethan let out a small, almost defeated laugh. "It's not that simple." "No." The old man agreed. "It's not simple, but it is straightforward." Ethan looked at him, confused. The old man bent down again, pulling out another weed. "Thoughts are like these plants. Some grow naturally. Fear, doubt, insecurity. You don't plant them. They just appear." He placed the weed aside and gently watered a nearby flower. "But confidence, peace, gratitude, those need care, attention, repetition." Ethan watched every movement closely now. "So what do I do?" he asked quietly. The old man paused, then looked up with calm certainty. "First, you notice the weeds." Ethan nodded slowly. Then you stop pretending they're flowers." That hit deeper than Ethan expected. He realized how often he had accepted his negative thoughts as truth, never questioning them, never challenging them. The old man continued, "And finally, you choose what to water." Ethan stood there in silence, the words settling into his mind. For the first time, his thoughts didn't feel like an uncontrollable storm. They felt manageable, not easy, but possible, as the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the garden. Ethan took a deep breath. "I've been watering the wrong things," he said softly. The old man smiled, returning his focus to the soil. "Most people do." Ethan turned to leave, then paused. "Will the weeds ever stop growing?" The old man didn't look up this time. "No," he said gently, "but they'll stop winning." Ethan walked away from the park that evening with something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not confidence, not certainty, but direction. And sometimes, that's all you need to begin. Chapter 3. The First Battle. The next morning, Ethan woke up to the same familiar voice in his head. Nothing had magically changed overnight. The doubts were still there, waiting for him. "You're still the same person. Yesterday didn't mean anything. You won't be able to keep this up." But this time, something was different. Ethan noticed the thoughts. He didn't immediately believe them. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, remembering the old man's words. Asterisk, notice the weeds. Stop pretending they're flowers. Asterisk, for the first time, he didn't rush to accept what his mind was telling him. He simply observed. As he got out of bed, the thoughts followed him just as they always had. While brushing his teeth, his mind whispered, "This is pointless. You'll go back to your old ways." Ethan paused. He looked at his reflection. Instead of reacting, he asked himself quietly, "Is that true?" The question felt unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. His mind didn't have an immediate answer. There was a brief silence. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was there, a gap. And in that gap, Ethan chose something different. "Maybe," he said softly, "but I can try today." It wasn't a powerful affirmation. It wasn't filled with confidence, but it was honest. And for now, that was enough. As the day went on, Ethan began to notice just how often his mind produced negative thoughts. It was constant. In the past, they had blended into the background. Now, they stood out clearly, like weeds he could finally see. At work, during a meeting, an idea came to him. Immediately, the familiar voice appeared. "Don't say it. It's not good enough." His chest tightened slightly. This was where he usually stayed quiet. But today, he hesitated. Not out of fear, but out of awareness. "That's a weed," he thought. He took a small breath. "I might be wrong," he said aloud, his voice steady but cautious. "But I think you could try a different approach here." As he spoke, his heart raced. He expected judgment, rejection, confirmation of his fears. But none of that happened. His team listened. One person nodded. Another added to his idea. The conversation moved forward. Ethan sat there, slightly stunned. The world hadn't collapsed. The thought had been wrong. Later that day, he made a small mistake in his work. Instantly, the voice returned stronger this time. "See, this is why you shouldn't try." For a moment, Ethan felt himself slipping back into old patterns. The thought felt convincing, heavy, familiar. But then he caught it. "That's not a fact," he told himself quietly. "That's just a thought." It wasn't easy. The emotion was still there. The discomfort didn't disappear. But instead of sinking into it, he stayed with it, watching it, like a cloud passing through the sky. By the afternoon, Ethan felt mentally exhausted. Questioning every negative thought felt like hard work. His mind kept pushing back, almost as if it was fighting to stay the same. "Why are you doing this?" the voice insisted. "It's easier to just listen." And for a moment, Ethan was tempted. It was easier. Familiar patterns always are. But then he remembered the garden. If he stopped now, the weeds would take over again. So he kept going, small step by small step, thought by thought. That evening, he returned to the park, sitting on the same bench as before. The air felt calmer, but his mind was tired. "This is harder than I expected," he said out loud, even though no one was there. "Of course it is." The voice startled him. He turned and saw the old man standing a few steps away, holding a small watering can. Ethan let out a breath. "It feels like the thoughts are getting louder," he admitted. The old man nodded knowingly. "They are." Ethan frowned. "Why?" The old man stepped closer, looking at the garden. "Because for the first time, you're not obeying them." Ethan thought about that. It made sense. The resistance wasn't a sign of failure. It was a sign of change. "So what do I do when they keep coming?" Ethan asked. The old man smiled gently. "You do exactly what you did today." He pointed to the ground. "You don't fight the weed by shouting at it. You remove it, and then you water something better." Ethan exhaled slowly, letting the words settle in. For the first time, he didn't feel defeated by his thoughts. He felt challenged by them. And that was different. As the sun set behind the trees, Ethan realized something important. The goal wasn't to win in a single day. It wasn't to eliminate every negative thought. The goal was simply this. Asterisk, don't let them grow unchecked. Asterisk, it was a quiet battle, invisible to everyone else, but deeply real to him. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like he wasn't losing, not because the thoughts had disappeared, but because he had finally started to fight back. Chapter 4, Rewiring the Mind. The days didn't suddenly become easier for Ethan, but they became clearer. What once felt like an uncontrollable flood of negativity was now something he could see, identify, and slowly influence. The thoughts still came. They hadn't disappeared, but now they no longer arrived unnoticed. Each one stood out like a voice stepping forward, waiting to be either believed or questioned. In the beginning, Ethan had to catch every thought manually. It was exhausting. His mind felt like a battlefield where nothing ever paused. But as the days passed, something subtle began to shift. The space between his thoughts grew. It was small at first, just a second of awareness before reacting. But that second became powerful. One morning, while getting ready for work, the familiar thought appeared. You're not improving. This isn't working. Ethan paused, looking at himself in the mirror. A week ago, he would have believed it instantly. But now, he tilted his head slightly and said, "That's not entirely true." He thought back to the meeting where he had spoken up, the moment he challenged his fear, the fact that he was even aware of his thoughts now. "I am improving," he said quietly. And for the first time, it didn't feel forced. It felt earned. Ethan began building small habits, simple, almost insignificant actions that slowly changed the direction of his mind. Every night, he wrote down 3 things that went well during the day. At first, it was difficult. His mind resisted, focusing only on what went wrong. But he pushed through. "I spoke up once. I finished my task. I didn't give up." They weren't big wins, but they were real. And slowly, his mind began to notice them more during the day. He also became more careful about what he allowed into his environment. He reduced the time he spent scrolling through negative content that left him feeling inadequate. He distanced himself, gently, from conversations that revolved around complaints and pessimism. It wasn't about avoiding reality. It was about protecting his mental space while it was still fragile. Some days he slipped. There were moments when the old patterns took over completely. Days when he didn't question the thoughts. Days when he felt like he was back at the beginning. One evening, after a particularly stressful day, Ethan sat alone in his apartment, staring blankly at the wall. "Nothing's changed." The voice said, "You're just pretending." This time, the thought felt stronger than usual. It pulled him in. For a few minutes, he believed it completely. The doubt, the heaviness, it all returned. But then something happened. Not a sudden burst of motivation, not a powerful realization, just awareness. "I'm doing it again," he whispered. He didn't criticize himself for slipping. He didn't fight aggressively. He simply noticed. And that changed everything. Instead of spiraling deeper, he took a slow breath and said, "Okay, today was hard, but that doesn't erase everything." It was a small recovery, but a meaningful one. The next day, he went back to the park. The old man was there, as always, tending to the garden. Ethan walked over, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I failed yesterday," he said honestly. The old man didn't look surprised. "No," he replied calmly. "You practiced." Ethan frowned slightly. It didn't feel like progress. The old man placed the watering can down and looked at him. "Do you think this garden grows perfectly every day?" Ethan glanced around. Some plants were thriving, but others looked weaker, still growing. "No," he admitted. The old man nodded. "Growth isn't about perfection. It's about consistency." He gestured toward a patch of soil. "Some days, I remove more weeds. Some days, fewer. Some days, I miss a few entirely. But I keep coming back." Ethan let those words sink in. "So slipping is part of it?" he asked. "Slipping is part of learning." The old man corrected gently. "What matters is how quickly you return to awareness." Ethan stood quietly, watching the garden. For the first time, he understood something deeper. This wasn't about becoming someone completely new overnight. It was about slowly rewiring the way his mind worked, through repetition, patience, and choice. The changes were invisible from the outside. No one at work had commented on it. No one had noticed the battles he was fighting. But inside, something was different. The noise was still there, but it no longer controlled him the same way. Later that week, during another meeting, a negative thought surfaced. "Don't speak. It's not worth it." Ethan recognized it immediately. This time, he didn't hesitate as long. "That's just a thought," he told himself. And then, almost naturally, he spoke. Not perfectly, not confidently, but willingly. And that was the difference. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan realized that his mind wasn't something to fear anymore. It was something to train. Like a muscle, it responded to repetition. Like a garden, it responded to care. The negative thoughts still existed, but they no longer defined him. They became background noise instead of guiding voices. And in their place, something new began to grow. Not constant positivity, not unrealistic confidence, but something far more powerful: balance. The ability to see a negative thought and not be controlled by it. And that, Ethan realized, was real progress. Chapter 5: The Blooming Garden. Weeks turned into months, and something within Ethan had quietly transformed. It wasn't obvious to the outside world. His routine looked the same. His life hadn't drastically changed. But inside, everything felt different. The noise that once controlled him was still there, but softer now, distant, like an echo instead of a command. One morning, Ethan woke up and noticed something unusual. There was no immediate rush of negative thoughts, no overwhelming weight, just stillness. It surprised him. He sat up slowly, almost expecting the familiar voice to return and fill the silence. And eventually, it did. "You'll have a bad day." But this time, Ethan didn't react. He didn't argue. He didn't believe it either. He simply said, "Maybe, but I'll handle it." And just like that, the thought passed. Not because it disappeared forever, but because it wasn't given power. That day felt lighter. Not perfect, not extraordinary, but peaceful in a way he hadn't experienced before. Later that evening, Ethan found himself walking back to the park, the place where everything had begun. The air felt familiar, comforting. The same trees, the same bench, the same quiet rhythm of life. But the garden had changed. What was once a small patch of soil with scattered plants had now grown into something vibrant. Flowers of different colors bloomed freely. The space felt alive, full of care, attention, and patience. And there, as always, was the old man. He knelt beside the flowers, gently watering them, completely present in the moment. Ethan walked up, a small smile on his face. "It looks different," he said. The old man glanced up, his eyes warm. "It always does when you give it time." Ethan looked around, taking it all in. "The weeds still grow, don't they?" The old man chuckled softly. "Every single day." Ethan nodded. "But they don't take over anymore." "No," the old man said, standing up slowly. "Because I don't let them." There was a quiet pause between them. Ethan took a deep breath. "I think I understand now." The old man tilted his head slightly. "Tell me." Ethan looked at the garden, then back at him. "It's not about getting rid of negative thoughts. It's about not feeding them." The old man smiled, a look of quiet pride in his eyes. "Exactly," Ethan continued, his voice steady. "They still show up, but I don't believe everything they say anymore. I don't let them decide how I feel or what I do." The old man picked up a small weed and held it between his fingers. "This will always exist," he said. Then he gently dropped it aside and pointed to a blooming flower. "But so will this." Ethan watched closely. "What you focus on," the old man said, "is what grows stronger." Ethan stood there in silence, letting the truth settle deep within him. For so long, he had tried to fight his mind, force it to be positive, silence the negativity, control every thought. But now he understood. It was never about control. It was about choice. The choice to pause, the choice to question, the choice to focus on something better. He sat down on the same bench where he once felt lost and overwhelmed. But this time, he felt grounded. The thoughts still came. "You're not there yet." Ethan smiled slightly. "I don't need to be. You could fail again. Maybe, but I'll try anyway." They no longer felt like enemies, just passing voices. After a while, Ethan stood up and looked at the old man one last time. "What happens if I stop doing this?" he asked. The old man met his gaze calmly. "The garden will grow wild again." Ethan nodded, not with fear, but with understanding. This wasn't a one-time change. It was a practice, a way of living. And strangely, that didn't feel overwhelming. It felt empowering as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow across the park. Ethan took one last look at the garden. It wasn't perfect. There were still weeds, still uneven patches, still work to be done. But it was beautiful because it was cared for. Ethan turned and began to walk away, not as someone who had fixed his mind, but as someone who had learned how to live with it. And as he stepped forward, he carried something simple, yet powerful, not the absence of negative thoughts, but the strength to rise above them. Start tending your mind today. Your mind is speaking to you right now. The question is, are you listening blindly, or are you choosing what to believe? You don't need to change everything overnight. You don't need to become perfectly positive. You just need to begin. Today, notice one negative thought. Just one. Pause. Don't accept it immediately. Ask yourself, is this really true? Then replace it with something more honest, more helpful, even if it feels small. Do it again tomorrow and the next day, because transformation doesn't happen in one big moment. It happens in small, consistent choices, just like watering a garden. If you keep showing up, if you keep choosing what to nurture, one day you'll realize something powerful. The voice that once held you back no longer controls where you go. So start today. Your mind is your garden. What will you grow? Seedling,